While many Mustang enthusiasts still like to make their horsepower naturally aspirated, it's probably not a stretch to say that many of us would love to have a supercharger on our Mustang, and for good reason. Superchargers are a great way to make horsepower, and they're also extremely reliable. Now, when it comes to supercharging a Mustang, one of the OGs in the game without a doubt is Vortech. Now, Vortech's been huge since the Fox body days, and Vortech owns Paxton, which was huge back in the 60s, so Vortech's been around a long time. And Vortech is still huge to this day because they make a great product, excellent fitment, and best of all, they make horsepower. So today we're going to turn up the horsepower on this 2019 Mustang with a complete supercharger kit from Vortech. Now, Vortech offers a few different options for your 2018 through 2021 Mustang GT. This is the complete kit shown here in the black finish. The complete kit's also available in a polished finish, and there's also the tuner kit. We'll get to that in a minute. But again, this is the complete kit. This will fit your 2018 through 2021 Mustang GT and work with a 6-speed or a 10-speed automatic. Now, this kit comes with the V3 JT trim supercharger, the air-to-air intercooler, the max flow fuel pump booster, a set of high flow injectors, and a custom Livernois tuner, and all the necessary hardware for installation. Now, if you go with the tuner kit, it's going to give you all of this minus the tuner, minus the fuel pump booster, and minus the injectors, allowing you to get your own fuel and get your own custom tune. Now, as I mentioned, this Vortech Supercharger Kit is designed for your 2018 through 2021 Mustang GT. It will not work on a GT350, it's not designed for the Mach 1, and you're probably wondering why we're installing it on a Mustang Bullet. Well, in the case, again, the kit's not designed for the Bullet because of the cold air kit and throttle body. In the case of this car, we're actually going to convert this back to GT specs, so we can do the installation on it that way. Selecting the supercharger installation, the first step is to basically disassemble all the components that are going to be in the way that we take off the car to work on. In the case of this though, the first thing you're going to do, put your windows down, because we're going to take the battery out, disconnect that, then your car is going to be dead, and you do have to get inside the car for a couple different steps with this installation. So again, windows down, and then disconnect your battery. All right, the battery disconnected. Remove the strut tower brace if you have one. All right, I'm gonna pop off the clips, remove the radiator cover. We're going to unbolt the top of the bumper cover now, remove the two 5.5s on either end, and then the 8mm across the middle. All right, now we're going to pull the splash shield back so we can disconnect the fender from the bumper. Now, you don't have to take the wheel off. We did that so you can see better. You can just turn it. Basically, remove the 3 clips here and 2 more down there. Now, to separate the bumper from the fender, it's going to be basically a push tab here, but there's going to be 2 10mm nuts. You can actually get to them from the engine bay if you want to, or down here, whichever you find easier. Now do the same thing on the other side. Okay, now underneath the car, remove the 6 screws from the belly pan. Then remove these push pins. Put the belly pan loose, just kind of pull down on this. Just a little push pin will pop off, and do the same thing on the other side. Now we're going to pop the bumper off of these mounting studs. Make sure you have something to put it on or an extra set of hands to help you hold it, because you will have to disconnect. Reach down, disconnect your lights. And remove the bumper cover. And now I'm going to take this sensor, disconnect it from the bracket here. And also disconnect from the bumper support. Then you're going to pop this sensor off and put it aside for now. Now, if your car does have active shutters, ours is a performance pack, so it does not. You'll move the shutter system next. Now, up in the engine bay, we're going to disconnect all these tubes and remove your factory air intake box. First thing to do though, Pull its clip back, disconnect the mass sensor and put it aside. Now we're going to drain the coolant. Start by popping the cap off the reservoir up top here. All right, down here on the passenger side, open the drain, drain your coolant. Now while that's draining down below, disconnect these two upper hoses from the factory coolant tank. Once most of the coolant's out, you're down to a slow drip. You can tighten the drain back up. And leave the pan underneath it. We're gonna go up top, disconnect the main tank. There will be some spillage, so leave this below. We're gonna disconnect these two 10 millimeters. And lift up the tank. There'll be another line at the bottom here. Disconnect that. All right, next the upper radiator hose comes off. Spring clip on this side, conventional clip on the other side. Let's get a little pick or screwdriver in here. Pull that down. Be prepared for a little leak here. All right, then pull this clip back here. Remove the hose. Put this aside, we'll be modifying it later. And now pop this fitting off here. Then remove this hose. Okay, now we're gonna remove the factory belt. This is the tensioner right down here, 15 millimeter. Now we're gonna disconnect the throttle body connector, pull the red tab back, and remove the throttle body. And just stuff a rag in here, just to make sure nothing gets down in there. The coolant tank out of the way, now we have to do some modifications to the actual mounts. We have to remove the one closest to the driver's side. So this has to be completely cut off. This over here then has to be ground smooth. This is to make more room for the intake tubing. So first thing you're gonna do is use a small flathead, pull this tab up, slide this off. Finally, the last step in this process here, we're actually going to remove the passenger side headlight and put that aside. All right, now we're going to prepare to install the actual supercharger bracket. First thing to do here, over on the passenger side, is remove these 3 bolts. One here, one down here, and this one below the belt. All right, now comes one of the somewhat tricky parts of the installation, but that is getting the actual bracket bolted to the engine. This is the bracket Vortech provides. There's a lot of different adjustment in this bracket for different pulleys, different boost levels, but kind of familiarize yourself with it as far as how it's gonna sit. I mean, it comes assembled, so you can sort of see how it's gonna go, but we have to disassemble it to install it in the car. The first thing we're gonna do, pop off this top idler. Next, remove this piece right below it here, this spacer here. The belt has to go around that and has to be attached to the bracket during installation. All right, next, we're gonna remove the only ribbed pulley on the bracket. Now we're gonna bring the belt in. So again, the ribs are wrapped around this pulley. And get this lined up back where we removed it earlier. And just get it hand tight. Now the space we just removed, we're gonna put that between the belt. Slide that back in. Now we're gonna remove this rubber band from these studs. Make sure you have it on a flat surface because they will fall through. And at this point, we're gonna remove these spacers. Now, they look very similar, but they are different sizes. So you wanna mark them somehow, whether you use tape, permanent marker, whatever you wanna do, but you wanna mark each one of the locations. I'm just gonna make a small mark on the bracket for each one. Call that 1, 2, 3, 4. I'll mark each one of the spacers as well. Now with them labeled, we can remove all of them. Now these 2 studs are the base, the lower part of the bracket. They're gonna go in 2 of those bolts we just removed from the factory. Basically what we gotta do is just remove these from the bracket, leave the spacers here. For now, we can push the bracket aside. With these studs removed, now remove the nuts and washers, leave them with the bracket. And we can install the studs on the engine. Put a little bit of blue Loctite on these. And then put one on basically either side of your AC compressor, the 2 bolts that we removed. Now we marked all of our locations so we actually know where these all go, but if not, you just have to measure the spacers as you go. The first one we're gonna install is this one here. 2.058 is the correct length for this one. This is ready to be installed. Slide that on. And then again, our position 2 that we labeled but double check should be 2.14, which is correct. This one will go on next. All right, so now you wanna measure in and basically thread in the stud. You wanna go to the spacer, to the end, and you want it to be 3 3/4. So let's see, we're a little bit long. go. Do the same for the other one. All right, so again, a little bit of a tricky part here. Now we're ready to put the bracket actually onto the studs. You want to make sure these spacers are not connected to anything, but they kind of have to stay in the bracket and then go over these two studs. I'll grab our spacer from location 4. Again, we measured it to double check. It is correct. That one's going to go between here and the top of the timing cover. You have to slide this out just a little bit on the bracket. Get that to go in. Take the other one, I'm gonna put a little dab of Loctite on here. And then thread it in. Just get it snug for now. All the other bracket hardware. A little bit of Loctite. Install the spacer between the cylinder head and the bracket. And then thread the bolt in. I'm gonna go back and tighten this one down as well. All right, now the nuts and washers can be installed back on these studs. Washers in place, again, a little dab of Loctite. And install the nuts. Okay, now grab that smooth idler we removed earlier. All right, so this middle spacer right here, we removed this earlier when we put the belt on. We put it back on for assembly. At this point though, we're actually gonna remove it again. The reason being is it makes it easier to get to some of the supercharger bolts. All right, so we're ready to install our actual supercharger head unit. First thing I'm gonna do though, is remove this plug and replace it with this drain line. These come pre-oiled, but basically when you do wanna change the oil in the future, this is a pain to get to. This will give us an extension, make it a lot easier to take it off. Again, make sure it is upright though so you don't spill the oil. So these are the bosses for the mounting hardware for the supercharger. What we're gonna do, just oil these up and thread them in and out once, just to make sure the threads are clean, make it a lot easier to do once it's on the car. To cut through the thread easier, we're gonna put a little bit of oil on each bolt. So just thread it all the way down and then take it back out, make it a lot easier to do it on the car. And just repeat this for all the mounting bosses. Before we mount the blower, just go back through, make sure everything is tight here now. All right, now we can sit the blower down on the bracket here. definitely want to get all of the bolts started before you tighten anything down. And the last two, you kind of have to just feel your way. They're kind of back here behind the supercharger underneath. Once all the bolts are started, I can go back, tighten everything down. All right, now we can reinstall the spacer we took out earlier once our supercharger is tight. Again, make sure it goes between the belt. So the belt's gonna go above and below. May have to just tap it in a little bit, make your life easier. So the diagram in the back of the instructions is basically as far as how to route the belt. Basically just take your time, make sure smooth side faces smooth side and the ribs go where the ribs go.
All right, the blower mounted, now we're gonna move on to some modifications we have to make basically to the cooling system. We have to add a new tank for the blower, but we have to modify these brackets because basically what's gonna happen is the radiator is gonna sit back a little bit for more clearance for our air intake tubes. So these have to be modified and shortened. So we're gonna unbolt both sides. So as we're gonna shorten this, what we have to do is drill new holes. So these templates are included. Basically gonna lay that over the existing location. It'll give you 2 more locations then to drill out. And you have to remove these tabs on the back. All right, we'll start by taking these tabs off. Okay, with those tabs ground off, now we're gonna grab the template that's provided. Lay that on here. We're gonna mark our holes. Center punch these. Okay, now we gotta cut this down and shorten it up. So basically right here on this indented section is where you wanna cut off. So come straight across here, just do a straight cut. Now once you cut that off, these little ends here have to be ground down, kind of make it like a smooth transition to the bottom here. Then do the same thing with the other side. And we're gonna put the modified brackets back on the radiator. We're gonna put the bolts in for now. Don't tighten anything, just put them in just to hold it in place. All right, now you wanna grab your OEM upper radiator hose. We removed this earlier. We have to make some modifications to this to clear the supercharger. First thing you're gonna do, remove the spring clamp, cut 2 inches off. approximately 2 inches. On the opposite end, we're going to cut off this plastic clamp. Be careful not to damage anything here, especially the hose. We will be cutting some of the hose off, but just be careful when removing the clamp. Then remove the hose from the fitting. And here we're going to take 1 inch off, which is basically just on the other side of where the clamp was. So the upper radiator hose that we just cut and modified, now we have to flip it over. So this curved end was on the engine side. This will now go to the radiator side with the factory clamp. This side here is going to get this fitting with a clamp provided. So we're going to bring this kind of under the blower. And connect back over here. And once you have it seated, tighten the clamp. All right, back in the car then, we have to also remove this plastic fitting here off of this hose and replace it with a normal hose clamp, again for a little more clearance. Just like the other one, cut carefully. Make sure you don't damage the hose. And re-secure it with one of the provided clamps. And now these are the 2 coolant hoses that went to the factory coolant tank. Now we're putting a new coolant tank over on our driver's side shock tower, so these basically have to be adjusted. This one, you want to basically adjust it here so it points down, and this one, you want to spin it 180 degrees so it's pointing over here. Now we're going to mount the new coolant tank, which is basically going to mount to this bolt and this standoff right here. First thing to do, pop this off. Just kind of push it out of the way for now. We'll mount that again later. Grab this bracket. Put this right here. Just leave it loose for now. All right, for the other bracket, we're gonna remove this nut right here. All right. Place the bracket on. Again, thread this back down. Don't tighten all the way because you want to have some adjustment here. I'll explain why in a second. Now grab the coolant tank and the supplied hardware and loosely bolt it to the bracket. At this point, if you have a strut tower brace, you want to grab that and your engine cover if you're using one. Basically just see where it's going to go in the slotted holes. Make sure it clears so we know we can go full forward, and tighten everything down. The engine side coolant hose that we rotated a little earlier, now will go in this upper fitting. This is a hose we removed earlier. This goes on the bottom of the factory coolant tank. What you're gonna do now, pull both these spring clips off and remove this sheath. We're gonna install this to the new tank and then modify it for fitment. One side of this hose will say ENG, that is your engine side. Take the other end, connect to the tank. And you can see here the angle's a little bit off on the engine side. You know, in theory, you could turn this, but being that it's a coolant line, you don't want to have any kind of a turn to it. So what we're gonna do is cut it kind of right where my thumb is, and they have a supplied fitting that will allow us to turn this and get it in the right location. Now grab the supplied fitting here, put that onto the hose and put it back in place. Once you have it fitted, we're going to pull it back off the car. Grab the provided stepless clamps and put one on either side. Now we put the sheath back on and then reinstall our factory clamps. The other molded hose that comes off the radiator from the driver's side has to tee into this line here. So what we're gonna do, basically measure back, straighten it out, measure back about 5 inches. Figure out right about where that T is gonna go, make a mark, and then cut the hose. Slide a stepless clamp over. Put the T in facing downward. Squeeze these clamps. And then connect this hose to the T fitting. So to make room from the charge pipes, we have to actually make some modifications to the windshield washer reservoirs. The first thing we're going to do is remove the pump and sensor to drain it, disconnect the harnesses, and remove the tank. Okay, now we're gonna remove these 2 bolts and this nut so we can actually remove this from the car. So the piece we gotta cut off is right here. Now again, be careful because this is part of the neck, so don't go too far over where it's flat. Basically just right here inside of that hole where the electrical harness was, cut straight across. This will be really impossible to see once I'm in there, but basically on the left side of your fuse box is a little zip tie that holds the main wiring harness to kind of a guide. You need to cut that zip tie so the harness has a little more movement, again, to adjust for the charge pipes. There's a steel bracket down here, basically where the ECU is. You wanna make sure this harness is on top of the steel bracket. So kind of just push it over a little bit, but make sure it is on top of it. And now we're gonna reinstall windshield washer reservoir. Make sure that harness we moved is to the inside behind this. And reinstall with the factory hardware. All right, now we can reinstall the pump. With the sensor. All right, we have a few more plugs to move to make room for discharge tubes. First one is the fan connector. Just pop this off. Kind of push it down out of the way for now. All right, since our car did not have the shutters, there's this extra wiring harness here. Just reach back to the bumper support, pop that off. Just kind of let it hang out of the way for now. And then remove these 4 gray clips holding this big wiring harness. Following the wiring harness over, there's another retainer down here. We're gonna pop that one off next. And you'll wanna get a set of cutters and actually cut that retainer off. Again, this step only for performance pack cars. This lower shroud goes away. Just reach up behind here, the tool, pop it off. Now again, only on your performance pack car, but this shroud here has to come off. This is held in by little plastic clips. Simply just pull down and they'll pop off. This will be modified, so keep it handy. All right, now we can remove these braces, 2 nuts on the bottom here, 2 bolts up top. This will be a little tricky to get to. Now remove each of the radiator shrouds, give it a good tug, pop the clip out. Keep these as well, we will be modifying them later. And finally pull this shroud off. This one we're not reusing, so toss it aside. The screws you removed for the bumper support, now we're gonna put them back in. Just a couple turns. Get about ½ an inch show on the back side. That's the screws we just backed out. What we're gonna do now is lift the charger cooler into place. And once you have it seated on the screws, thread them all the way in. And then if you had the factory braces, use the factory hardware on the back. If not, use supplied hardware. Okay, we're gonna grab our ambient air temp sensor we moved earlier, fish this back down. Put it back in the original location. Now, this is the plug for the shutters our car did not have. So we're gonna remove this little piece here, cut this off, and zip tie this to the harness. Now, since our radiator is tilted forward now, this has to be cut. Basically go here, and you're just gonna go straight across over to there. All right, with that modified now, put it back up into place. And reinstall OEM push pins. Okay, with the charge cooler mounted, move over to the driver's side. I'm gonna pop off this horn bracket. Don't be alarmed, as one of our viewers pointed out, 2019s only have one horn. So this is actually perfectly normal, even though it sounds terrible. And then also remove the J clip. Keep this and the hardware, they'll be used later. Now you notice if you follow the blower down, this AC line is a little bit in the way. So what we want to do, just carefully, slowly bend it towards the fan shroud until we get proper clearance. All right, now we're going to assemble the bypass valve. Grab the gasket, supplied hardware, and then we're going to install that with a discharge facing towards the larger part of the pipe. So this discharge tube is basically gonna sit like this. We put some tape on it because you kind of have to come in from the bottom and sort of work it into place. Now don't put the couplers on yet, get it where it needs to go, and then there'll be room to put the silicone couplers on later. You kind of have to come in the bottom here. You can pull on the radiator a little bit. It is a tight fit. sit just like that. And now we can install the coupler. Get on the supercharger side first. Bring the discharge tube in. Clamps in place and tighten them down. Now grab the 3-inch sleeve with a little bump in it. Again, we'll put 2 more clamps. Put it on the other side of the discharge pipe. Then snug up the clamp. Okay, now over here on the passenger side of our charge cooler, pull the cover off. Put a 3-inch straight clamp on. Get the clamp in place, but don't tighten it yet. Before we install the next tube, this tab here has to be bent upward. So now we're going to connect the charge cooler to our discharge pipe. I get the clamps in place, snug them down for now. Now grab your headlight, you're gonna plug it back in here. I'm just gonna make sure basically everything clears. If it does, we can leave the headlight installed. Our headlight didn't fit the first time, so we've adjusted the pipe down a little bit. Try again. Time we're good. Now, same deal over here on the driver's side. Gonna bend this tab forward for some clearance. All right, over on the driver's side, this discharge tube is gonna basically sit just like this. So I'm gonna pull the cover off. So the coupler and both clamps on, we have the reducer, connect to the intercooler. And snug them down. Okay, we're gonna put a coupler into place now on this pipe. I'm gonna put 2 clamps on here. So the tube will be angled like this. You're gonna come in from the engine bay and you go down to that coupler. All right, with the tubing from the charge cooler up in the engine bay, the next thing we're gonna work on now is the new mass air housings. First thing you're gonna do is grab your factory air box and inlet and remove the factory sensor. Now install the sensor into our new Vortech meter, and it will only fit one way. Tighten it down with the provided hardware. All right, since we're working the engine bay now, we want to mount the radiator. So we're going to put the original hardware back in. That way we know how much space we have to work with. Now, connecting the mass air meter, there is a flow arrow. The arrow is going to go towards the throttle body. We use a reducer clamp here. And fit that to the pipe from down below. And then you want to turn this, make sure the sensor is towards the engine over here. And then take your harness, fish it underneath, and connect. And we're just going to snug down these clamps for now. We will have to make adjustments later. Now this hose will go in here next and connect to our throttle body, but we're actually going to hold off for that now and move on to swapping out our fuel injectors. All right, first step with the injectors is to remove these 4 nuts. Pop these off. The guide's basically for the heater hoses. Let's put them aside for now. Pop the foam off both sides. You can see the rails. And we're going to disconnect the pressure sensor and then disconnect the injectors. Now we'll disconnect the low pressure fitting on this side. Make sure you have a rag, you will lose a little bit of fuel. Grab this evap line here, just kind of put it out of the way. Now we're going to disconnect the high pressure line over on this side. Again, make sure you have a rag. You'll need a tool for this. Now remove 4 screws for the fuel rails. Now we can lift up, remove the fuel rails. Now we're going to swap out injectors. Now they're all going to go in the factory location except for 2. Over here on the driver's side where the pressure sensor is, this one here, and then on the passenger side, this one back here. So we're going to do those first. Start by popping the clip off. And remove the injector. This one we're going to go in, and we're actually going to rotate it 90 degrees. Then we're going to put the clip back on. It's going to have to come on from the side, so we'll protrude out a little bit. Just get the lock in place. Again, 90 degrees. Now we can swap out the rest the normal way. Now grab the passenger side foam cover right where the R is. Take a 1-inch corner out of here to give us room for that new plug. Before we can reinstall our fuel rail, we have to modify or basically exchange these spacers. Now these are kind of lightly pressed into the manifold. Just grab some pliers, twist them a little bit, and they should come out. Now once you finally win the fight and get the original ones out, I'm gonna put the new ones, shorter ones, down into place. So lightly tap them in, but they should just fall right in. And put the rails back into place. And then bolt them down with the supplied hardware. And now go back through, just basically reconnect everything you disconnected earlier. Now reinstall the foam. All right, the injector's installed, and now we're gonna move on to the second part of the fuel upgrade, and that is the booster. Now your fuel pump is located below the seat. The booster is actually to mount behind this panel. So first I'm gonna do is basically get all this stuff out of the way. Reach under the seat, there's a little push tab, just pop it up. All right, now you can see the fuel pump modules right here. We're gonna unplug that. Then fold down the seat. Pop the seatbelt retainer off. Bring that down with the belt itself. Now we're going to pop off this door sill plate so we can access the front of this. Simply pull up. Push, release the clips. Now this foam block is going to be in the way of the booster, so you want to pop off these metal clips. Break that off first, then remove these metal tabs. The bracket for our booster is going to go right here. So you get it kind of seated towards the edge. Mark the holes we're going to drill. We're going to center punch the holes. And then drill. right, now we're gonna assemble this before we put it in the car. It'll be way easier to do it outside the car. Okay, now we're going to install the booster in the holes we drilled earlier. Now we're going to grab the adapter harness, plug it in. Last step is to ground this wire here, but first, this brown wire, let's cut the end off this since this is not used. I'm going to tape it to the ground. Okay, then we connect. Now we can reinstall the panels we removed. All right, now we got to modify this PCV hose, push in the blue tabs, pop it off. So we're not going to use this line, but we need both of these fittings. And these are basically heat shrinked on, so you want to carefully basically just cut it away. Okay, now grab the provided 5/8 hose. We're going to cut 3 pieces, 2 inches apiece. And the smaller hose, we're going to cut 1 4-inch piece. So this is an exploded view of basically what we're going to build. Now we're only going to assemble the straight section here first. So don't worry about the ends of the angle, just the straight section, but this is how you're going to assemble it and then use the stepless clamps. I'm going to grab some heat shrink here. Need 2 1-inch pieces. Next we're going to take this flex braid, put it over this, and heat up both sides of the heat shrink. Okay, now we're going to assemble the 90-degree. All right, now grab your stock airbox lid, grab the Vortech block-off plate, and use the original bolts, original screws I should say, that came with it. Tighten them down. Now take our factory airbox, carefully slide it down into place in the factory location. It's going to be tight against the tube, but that is normal. Make sure we have clearance. Reinstall with the factory bolt. I grab the K&N filter supplied, put it into your stock airbox. Now grab the driver's side hose, we're going to pop that off. Now on the driver's side piece, we're going to remove this 90 right here. I grab the rest of our 5/8 hose. We're gonna measure out an 18-inch piece. Okay, we're gonna put a stepless clamp on, then put this in the end of the 18 hose and clamp it. I'm gonna pop this off here and remove this hose. Replace that with a piece of tube from our kit. Fish that down to where the intake's gonna go. Now install the modified PCV tube that we made. Again, over on the driver's side here. Fish this over. I'm gonna grab our airbox lid. This will be a tight fit over here. We'll put the lid in place. Now before we install the last pipe here, I want to explain this section here. Basically, your mass air meter, this tube goes up to your throttle body. Now again, in the case of our car, we actually wanted to save the GT350 manifold, so we got an adapter, used the stock GT throttle body, we're able to make everything fit. And the last pipe, we're going to use the bump connection for here, and this is going to go down and fit in there. Now you might want to unbolt the radiator here to give yourself a little more room, because this is a very tight fit. I'm gonna put the clamps on, which I should have done beforehand, but it's easy enough to take them apart and just reassemble them. Now fish the 3/8 hose down, connect to the brass barb fitting, no clamp required. And grab the 5/8 for the driver's side valve cover. Put that on the fitting, clamp down with the clamp. All right, once you have the tubes in place, relocate the horn right here. Basically this bottom hole. Slide the factory clip in place. And grab the horn bracket. Grab the factory hardware, and I'll put the horn into place. And tighten down. If the harness won't reach, just loosen this bolt and turn the horn until it can connect. All right, so last step here, we have to modify these. Since we actually moved the radiator, this will hit the cover, so we're gonna cut it down and then grind it smooth. Now we're going to test fit the cover. Make sure it sits flat. We're good, ready to reinstall the bumper.
Now do everything in the reverse order you did before. Put your bumper back on, connect all the hardware in the wheel wells, and then install the radiator cover. These two holes will no longer be used because we modified our radiator brackets. All right, so we flashed the tune on the car. Now we're gonna fire it up, see how it sounds. And there you have it, Vortech Supercharged 2019 Mustang Bullet. Now, a couple things about this installation. Like we said, this kit from Vortech is designed for a GT. So it'll fit your 2018 and up GT with either the 6-speed manual or the 10-speed automatic. In our case, we did fit it to the Bullet, required 2 modifications. We needed a throttle body adapter, a GT throttle body, and then we do extend the actual harness for the throttle body to make everything work. Now, this is a complete kit from Vortech. It would take this car from 480 horsepower to just under 700 horsepower with the supplied tune at right around 8 pounds of boost. Now again, with this car, we will probably get a custom tune at one point. But before we do that, we're actually gonna take it, we're gonna put it on the dyno in an upcoming video and show you the numbers it actually puts to the ground. But the JT trim Vortech included with this kit has a lot left. So if you want to make more power with this kit, very easy to make 700 plus to the tire. Even pushing 800 is not that hard with the components that are included with this kit with some additional fuel upgrades. Now again, as far as the tune that's included, you do have to download your factory tune to the provided tuner, email Livernois, and they'll give you a custom tune within about 24 to 48 hours to get your car on the road. Now, as far as installation goes, this is something you can do at home. There are no specialty tools really required for this, but give yourself at least a long weekend, get some extra help. You'll need a good stock toolbox, but again, this is something you can do yourself. You'll be back on the road in no time.